Welcome to the webinar, Navigating the Future of BRM. In this webinar, we are going to talk about what is important to build collaborative partnerships, and very specifically how that fits within future visions that we have. So before we start, I'll do a quick introduction of who we are. So I am Peter Lijnse. I am a BRM leadership coach, work for different organizations on BRM, either in coaching capacity or as a facilitator, workshops, training courses, etc. I'm joined with Elka Schrijver here, who is managing chat. So if you have questions along the way, feel free to ask questions in chat. She will manage the chat. Elka is also a leadership coach with Lijnse Consulting and does the same thing as what I'm doing, which is coaching people, facilitating workshops, training courses, etc. Recently, we wrote a book on leading with impact. That book is available on Amazon. And that book is focused on building an impact canvas for initiatives specifically. And we are currently writing two other books. The one is a little bit of the topic of what we're doing today. I'll show you that later on, that we have a book on a BRM framework in the works. It's a little bit later than we thought. It always takes more time than you think. So that's a little bit about us. So what are we going to talk about today? This session is going to talk about future of BRM and talk a little bit about, okay, what do we see as leadership coaches where BRM is going? We're going to talk about results, leadership for results, and of course we will then venture out into a little bit of the BRM framework. There is some time for questions and answers at the end, and if you have chat along the way, I'm sure Elka will address some of those as well. Now, let's dig into this. The future. No one can predict the future. That's next to impossible. Things change. Yeah, we can see certain signals. We can see certain things that we say, "Hey, this is happening." Is this something that is going to happen more frequently, or is this something that we need to take into account? Now, you can have a certain destination in mind where you say, "Hey, this is what I want to get to," but that doesn't mean that we always have to immediately look at okay, this is absolutely what the future is going to be. Now you can shape this. Yeah, you can't predict it, but you can shape the future. You can start thinking about, okay, what do I really need to do? By the way, this image is from a couple of years ago when I did a presentation around future of BRM, which is still valid actually. But I was looking for a 10-year time frame, 2035. Couldn't find an appropriate image at this moment, so I need to look for that, and maybe I need to go to ChatGPT and get me an image from there, etc. But for me, 5 years is a little bit short sometimes from a future perspective when you really look at future visions. 10 years is an easier approach. Why? Because in 10 years, I can remove every single constraint I have right now. So if I look at 10 years from now, I would be able to say, yeah, I can absolutely do these kind of things. So that's the key part. Now, I want to take this 5-year time frame for this presentation anyway. There's lots of things that we need to address. There's lots of things that we need to figure out. But we see certain things happening in the market, interest around business relationship management, and certain things that we also recognize that are not being addressed. And that's what I want to really focus on in this first part. So first thing is, you've heard this statement lots and lots of time, potentially. Relationships are everywhere. And that's true. Everyone has relationships. It's not something that one person has. Everyone has relationships. The challenge, though, is that when we, and a lot of you will be really focused maybe on business relationship management, you quite often see it, okay, we'll do this group that does completely focused on business relationship management, and the rest, we don't really incorporate them. In our opinion, when I look at signals in the market, we're starting to see more and more that BRM should be seen as a leadership competency. And this is I think one of the things we as leaders, we always had, okay, we need to have presentation skills, we have to have communication skills, etc. Why is it not the case that we are talking about relationship management skills for leaders as a standard thing that you need to have? And I think this is where the future is going, because I hear more and more people saying, I want to know more about business relationship management. I'm not a business relationship manager in a role or in a function, but I recognize that I need to understand this. Yeah. So relationships are everywhere. We need to address that as a leadership competency, as a leadership capability in an organization. So that's the first part of that. And why is that? Because there are situations where we absolutely need to start thinking about, how do we do this? How do we get everyone involved in this? Is that important? Now, and this is one of the things that Elka and I have been working on. And this is a slightly different version. We try to change it up sometimes, but when you map the value and impact of a BRM capability that it has on the organization. So if I really understand that I have the competencies in the organization to be able to manage relationships, and link that to the leadership competences that we have, what we quite often see is that new organizations, and this is part of BRM as a leadership competency. New organizations quite often emergent state. We have a little bit of training around business relationship management. We understand it kind of, but eventually you get potentially a BRM team and a business relationship management team, and start to create impact on the organization, but in a very siloed based approach. It's quite often untapped potential if you really look at it from an organizational wide perspective. And I think this is the signal we start to see. We need to widen the effect of business relationship management in organizations. Now, I have seen organizations that says, okay, well, let's train all our leaders on business relationship management, but we don't give them the practical practical techniques and tools, etc., on how to do it. And that's quite often where we see this quadrant of strategic alignment needed. It's quite often seen that, yeah, everyone knows that relationships are important. We've rolled out all different kind of training courses through the whole organization, and now we start to see that no one actually really still does anything different. And that's some of the things that we're going to discuss in some of the other signals we're going to see. So that's not helping as well. Yeah, you can train people, but if they don't have practical experience on how to do things, so there is no how-to guides, there's no focus on doing these kind of things, you still don't get the result you're looking for. Yeah, you're looking for impactful relationships. You're looking for a combination of, there is a value and impact of BRM capability. It has, we can see that, plus leaders understand it across the organization. So BRM as a leadership competency is going to be important. Interesting enough, we see more and more organizations asking us for, I want to know more about BRM because I want every one of my leaders to do this. And they see BRM as a part-time role. Yeah, that's how it quite often starts. Instead of, oh no, I can't afford, or I don't want to build a BRM team, but I want my leaders that are managing other groups and managing other staff, etc. I want them to know about building relationships. So again, that is part of that leadership competency we start to see. And that goes through the whole organization. That's in executive management, that is in middle management, etc. So it is going to be important to have that. Now, what else is there? Relationships is not always, well, it's really not the goal. The goal is to build relationships to improve collaboration. And I quite often focus more on collaboration nowadays than actually relationship management. Why? Because collaboration is very well understood, etc. Because we're getting more and more people involved in things. So we just want to make sure that when we do things, that things work well together. Yeah, and collaboration is an general word that is being used a lot in organizations, and it's but if you have to dig in what it really means. It's trust, it's communication, it's shared purpose, it's role clarity, interdependence, diversity, flexibility, agility, whatever else you can come up with. So we quite often need to break it up in those kind of pieces. But relationships, and this is the key part. With relationships, you try to get better collaboration. By building better relationships, we always say we get better results. We get great results through great relationships. But why is that? Because we collaborate. Yeah, we collaborate better. We have better trust because relationships build trust. We communicate better in the relationships. Yeah, definition of relationships is quite often focused on communication and behavior or the actions you take. So collaboration is important, and I think a lot of people that currently are in business relationship management, we're focused so much on building relationships, but we need to understand why we're doing it. It's about building results, and quite often, how do we build those results? Through the collaboration. So when I look at the future of BRM, I start to see that more and more people need to understand relationship management, yeah, and understand how that is a competency to be able to get better collaboration in the organization. Yeah, that's where we need to go. Yeah, so we start shaping a little bit of that future of where we need to focus on. Now, I already talked about relationships management, collaboration. I want to very specifically focus on a highly undervalued element, I think, in business relationship management. It is mentioned, but there's so much there that can help us, and that is organizational behavior. Now, this is kind of interesting that I mentioned this. This is there's research being done for years. Yeah, I met someone a couple of years ago that said, "Yeah, no, I had 20 years ago. I was taught having about organizational behavior, etc." So this is not new. But the key thing is, this is one of the challenges we quite often see. If you're in a role of building relationship management, how often have you recognized that you build relationships, you're trying to get people to collaborate, and then you suddenly realize they're still not doing the things that they need to do? We don't reinforce or focus on specific behavior. And why is behavior so important? Because in the end, it drives the result. Yeah, we need to reinforce desired behavior. And this is something that needs to happen within the relationships. I need to get people to do things differently. I need to get people to take different actions. If you don't really like the word behavior, we quite often use the word actions for that. But for me, it's doing things differently. If you have 2 or 3 teams that need to work together, you need to focus on, okay, what is desired behavior within those teams to work together? So it's directly focused on that collaboration. Now, why is this important? First thing is, we see a lot of the challenges in our coaching around behavior. We see a lot of business relationship managers directly affected by this. And that is something to take into account. I need to sneeze and hold on a moment. Okay, so when we look at the challenges you have as a business relationship manager that you currently have, but it's going to be even more important from a future perspective. Manage behavior. Yeah. Focus on organizational behavior management. If you don't do that, you're going to see that all the things that you do are useless. You build relationships, etc., but no one is changing their habits. No one is changing the way they do things. So to really get results within relationship management, you have to focus on organizational behavior. Yeah, and that is for a lot of organizations very difficult, but there are ways to do that. Yeah, we have an organizational behavior management course. Elka is a facilitator in that, and it's focused on doing things differently from a relationship perspective, but also making sure that other people actually get to the right results. Yeah, so this is going to be, again, very important to ensure that we don't forget this. Yeah, from a future perspective, this is where the future is. Organizational behavior. Behavior drives results. Yeah, like collaboration drives results. Overall, relationships drive results. Now, the last thing that I want to focus on here from a signal perspective that we need to address is managing complexity. We cannot, within relationship management, in business relationship management, see everything as standard workflows, standard processes, etc. We are working in very complex environments, which means we need to address that, and that managing that complexity is going to be important. If you want to know more about this, I mean, Connecting framework from David Snowden, for instance, is one of those. But for me, it is important that it's not just, okay, we need to get some experts in and then we automatically know what to do. No, our work quite often is extremely complex. So navigating that complexity requires us to drive experimentation, for instance, and there's behavior linked to that. Yeah, there's like because some people have some, I can't experiment. We don't have time for that, or we don't want to do that. And what if it fails, and all those kind of things. Managing complexity and complexity of situations. There are a lot of different things we're doing. We need to start thinking about how we address that, and that's quite often through experimentation. There's a certain agility requirement. From a relationship perspective, you need to address that. So we've seen 4 different elements of where we need to go. Now, interesting enough, I like talking about it from a future perspective. And the reason why I'm doing that is because for a lot of organizations, this is not what we're focused on. We are focused on techniques. We're focused on, okay, how we're doing this, how we're doing that. We need to build relationships in a certain way, etc. But if we really want to become successful, we need to focus on the results we want to get. Yeah, and we want to build relationships, and I'm still looking at building those relationships. But in those relationships, we need to focus on trust and collaboration. Yeah, we need to really focus on the collaboration elements. We need to build collaborative partnerships. We quite often talk within business relationship management around strategic partnerships, and I think that term is not always useful. I think strategic partnership, although definitely and there's value in the discussion around that, sometimes it's about collaboration. And why do we use the word collaboration in there? Because if I'm an order taker, and some of you will be familiar with the terminology here around order takers in relationship maturity, etc. If I'm an order taker, I can still be collaborative. Yeah, I can still do a lot of collaboration, but it's still like, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that. And high performing order taker is as good as in strategic partnerships that has collaboration. It's just depending on the situation we have. So we need to leverage our strengths. We need to leverage the diverse elements of all of this. And we need to start thinking about how do we build collaborative partnerships from a leadership perspective. And this is not just the BRM team, although that can start there. Managing team behavior, reinforce desired actions. If you see something that is seen as good, or a good action, reward it, recognize it, reinforce it. Okay, this is what we want to have. Cultivate that positive culture. Yeah. In your relationships, you always need to address that. Yeah. So when you build your relationship network, you need to create that positive culture. And then, of course, navigating the complexity around this. Promoting experimentation, value feedback and adaptability. So when you look at this, we want to achieve results. I want to talk a little bit around business relationship management here. And we quite often say business relationship management is around evolved culture, which normally gets a little bit like, okay, yeah, it's language and behavior, etc. And we mention it here, but it's so much more. It's a positive culture. It's collaborative, and it is necessary to build the foundation, basically, for your building your relationships. But I see also a lot of people that are working within business relationship management focusing on, I need to have this technique around relationship maturity. I need to have a technique around relationship improvement. I need to focus on drive value. Yes, you do. But if I look at relationship improvement, where lies the improvement? In trust and collaboration, building that, in strengths that we have, in reinforcing actions and behaviors, in creating a positive culture. Most relationship strategies I've seen, or relationship improvement strategies I've seen, in the end are not about technology or processes. They are about organizational behavior. And I think that is sometimes undervalued. We don't see that. If you want to work towards the future of better results, great results that we get out of our relationships, you need to address these elements. If you don't do that, it's going to break down. Yeah? And this is one of the things that we are very passionate about always. We have more discussions around organizational behavior than necessarily the documentation, etc. That we need, or the techniques or the approaches. We do that, or we have those discussions, but it is important to always address these kind of elements. So if you want to be ready for the next 5 years, this is where you need to start. This is not easy, and this is not easy to address, but you do have that. Now, what I'm going to do is one statement here, and then I'll go into a little bit more of the techniques, etc. But rather than obsessing over techniques and processes, the true essence of success lies in understanding and nurturing people elements, behavior, relationships, and collaboration. It's the human touch that transforms good work into great results. Yeah. So when we look at organizations, we absolutely need to start thinking about how are we going to do this? What are some of the ways we can address that? Now, I just said, okay, you have all these kind of elements of behavior and collaboration and trust and agility and all those kind of things. And some of you will have some like, yeah, but what do I need to do now? Yeah, how I'm going to do this? This is all great, but I need to figure out what I'm going to do. Now, the first thing is we're going to talk a little bit about a BRM framework. This is something we are currently developing in more detail, and it takes always longer than you think, these kind of things. But we started working with different organizations around BRM framework, and business relationship management quite often requires very specific focus on certain elements. So we developed a BRM framework that has all these different kind of elements. And some of you might have seen this, but I want to go into a little bit more detail on this one. So every BRM team, and it's kind of fun that I just talked about all the factors that you need to talk about collaboration and behavior, and now I'm going into techniques and processes, and I just told you not to do that, but the story will get there. The key thing here is we have 6 elements or main focus areas within BRM. We have foundational elements, which requires us to focus on, okay, how do we organize BRM? What are the competencies? How do we do learning and development from a BRM perspective? Is there a BRM team? What kind of performance do we need to have? So all those kind of things are foundational elements. And I said that BRM is leadership competency, and we quite often see it that way. That doesn't mean you don't have to have a BRM team. You still can have people fully assigned to that. So you need to define that. You need to define your organization, but you also need to have a community of practice that is wider than just the BRM team. Yeah, that needs to have a community of practice that is part of the rest of the organization. Now, there are things around cultivating relationships. There are things around evolving culture, driving value, and achieving strategy. We pulled that out a little bit, and that's more the purpose, demonstrating purpose and strategy are achieved. Cultivating relationships. What we see in there is relationship observation, assessments, relationship improvement plans, collaboration themes, relationship value networks. Yes, we often still focus on relationship maturity assessment with a lot of organizations, but it's quite often in an element more of, okay, well, how do we collaborate? Yeah, and we start seeing themes coming up. So if different people are looking at, okay, what is the biggest challenge? We quite often find that there are certain things that are in from a collaboration perspective that is across the organization. And we also need to understand how our relationship networks possibly drive value. Now, I'll go through a few other ones, and then I'll talk about how it linked this to the previous discussion. Evolve culture, role clarity. Yeah, part of culture is role clarity. We need to have language and behaviors, policies, and guidelines. We definitely need education and training wider than just maybe from a BRM team perspective. Organizational behavior management approach, how we're going to address that. Yeah, what is the desired behavior, how we're going to focus on results through behavior. And then quite often there is a certain leadership coaching approach. We see more and more organizations requiring coaching, not necessarily from outside coaches, but also internally in the organization around relationship management. So the leadership coaching approach here is focused on that. In driving value, our book Leading with Impact is talking about impact canvas, for instance, but you can there's references there to value measurements, prioritizations. You have decision making, what you need to do, value optimization approach, and again, in your relationships, you drive that value and impact. But it doesn't mean you have to be fully involved in that. Quite often this links to product managers, project managers that are doing prioritization, etc., and value and impact. And then achieving strategy, we often hear people say we need to do demand shaping. That links directly to strategy. If I shape my demand in such a way that I can achieve my strategy, we need to talk about impact stories, business capability road mapping, strategy mapping. Simon Wardley has, for instance, Wardley maps from a strategy perspective. Those are all things that you can start addressing. And then reporting and communication. I need to have strategic relationship plans, where I'm going to go to, what I'm reporting on that. Experience management. Yeah, there is a lot of organizations are still focusing on, or needs to focus on even just NPS surveys, etc. So net promoter score surveys. How do we manage the experience overall? We need to have dashboards showing what we do, what we're working on, and we quite often need to BRM annual report how relationships actually drive results. Now, all of these kind of things you need to work on. The problem is you can't do all of that. Every single time we get discussions around, okay, what do we need to focus on from a BRM perspective? And I always say, Focus on some things that are important for you to make that next step. And especially when we talk about BRM teams, which sometimes is very siloed and doesn't give the organization the value it's looking for. But we quite often need to focus on, okay, what do we need to do? And I worked with one organization where we did an assessment where it was like, don't touch value. Yeah, we don't have time for that. That is part of project management at this moment. It's driving value and impact. Yeah, we'll get to that. What is really important, how do we build relationships right now? Yeah, and that I think is part of this. For me, it's important to pick out a few. I normally tell people, okay, do a few things. And in most organizations, when you start with BRM, for instance, you need to build your BRM organization and your community of practice a little bit out. You need to do some learning and development, etc. And quite often, the first thing you recognize is role clarity. But you can also start looking at, okay, I just want to build relationship improvement plans. Yeah. So again, all of those kind of things are part of your strategy. And what we quite often do is helping organizations to figure out, where do you need to focus your efforts right now? Not everything is necessary. Yeah. You need to start slowly. You need to figure out what you want to do. So this is part of the technique side. And I recognize that I just said, just a couple of minutes ago, I basically said, well, techniques are not the most important part. But this is normally where we start, because people want to talk about these kind of things. But now we need to put that layer on top of how do we address this. And I think this is important. So I'm going to give you an example here. Relationship observation and assessment. And that can include, I'm just observing relationships, doing some self-assessments. There can be full relationship maturity assessment based on relationship maturity models, etc. There's lots of different ways of doing that. It can be done very formal, can be done very informal. But we need to address some questions that if we don't do that, it's going to be just a technique. And I think this is what the area is. So I'm just going to pull that one out. We can do this for every single technique, and the questions will be slightly different. This is something we are currently developing for each of these boxes, basically, not just the description of what the box is, but so the 1.1, 1.2, etc. But also, what kind of questions do you need to ask yourself around what do I need to have in place? So the first thing is, remember that chart of impactful relationship, yeah, the 2x2 matrix. We need to get the value and impact of BRM in the organization linked to the right people in the organization. Yeah, that more leaders are understanding what the competency is, etc. So if I do relationship observations or assessment, I need to think about who needs to be involved. Who are those key individuals? And sometimes we do it too siloed. Yeah, we focus on one group. Yeah, they're going to do a relationship maturity assessment. We don't include the right people, or we don't include everyone. And we don't educate people on why we're doing this. Yeah. Now, I don't care about the result of a relationship maturity assessment. I do care how it's going to increase collaboration. And if it doesn't increase collaboration, if there's no result coming from this, why did we do it? Is it just a measurement and we say, oh yeah, good, we're doing really good, we're trusted advisors, we marked ourselves there, yeah, good for you. Does it help with the collaboration? How do we quantify that? How do we measure that? Yeah. Do we see, out of a relationship maturity assessment, for instance, do we see different behaviors coming up? What specific behaviors do we need to cultivate? How do we address that? And that's, I think, one of the challenges we have often with these techniques that we use within relationship management. We haven't really talked about what behavior we're actually trying to drive towards. Now, if I, for instance, take as an example relationship improvement plans, I need to address the behavior. I need to address what is the desired elements that we need to have in that relationship improvement. How are we going to do that? Relationship observation. Sometimes we need to manage complex situations. It is not easy. We often see things like, okay, we have a relationship between two different groups. No, it's in practice, it's multiple people in those two different groups. Quite often, it's not even two groups. We have 5 groups that need to work together, 5 different teams. How do we address that complexity? And how do we assess that in such a way that we can start looking at resolving the challenges we have? And another question, for instance, is there commitment for the technique? We've seen situations where it was like, yeah, we absolutely want to do this, and it comes from one group, and other groups do not want to be involved in it. Is there commitment in the organization to do this? Do people say, yeah, absolutely, I want to talk about this, or not? So for each of these techniques, we need to start thinking about the collaboration element. What are we trying to get from a result out of that? What are the actionable behaviors we want to have? Yeah, how do we measure those kind of things? How do we navigate the complexity in that? So the reason why I'm doing this is because when I talked about the future of business relationship management, we quite often see that we need to talk about, like I said before, collaboration, behavior, complexity. We need to address this in our techniques. Is this absolutely going to happen? Yeah. Is this driving something? So if I build a BRM team, why do I do that? Who's going to be involved? What is actually a BRM team? For me, a BRM team is a group of leaders that together decide that they're focusing on relationship management. Is this a dedicated function? No, not necessarily. There's lots of people that do this part-time, like I said before. So the key thing is who would be part of a BRM team, or do we have an extended BRM team? What is the reason for having that BRM team? Is to increase collaboration within the organization, or to solve things. A lot of BRM teams are being very proactive, yeah, and it's very difficult to show. Okay, I avoided this. But the fact is, that is what we need to focus on. Yeah, how can I get teams to work differently through relationships? So this is what we were focusing on. And if you ask questions for each of these techniques, I can start to look at a heat map, for instance. This is one of the things I'm looking at. Is can I, for instance, with this BRM framework, can I say, we're doing well in relationship improvement plans. We have elements in there that are absolutely driving us forward. We are not really doing well in maybe some of the red ones. If there's no dot on there, it basically means we don't work on it right now. We might have to, but we haven't. But for instance, role clarity is yellow. Why is it yellow? Because it might not be fully accepted in the organization, or not everyone is focused on this. So what we're doing here is creating a way to show where you are from a BRM framework perspective. Now, and I'm going to go 2 steps back here. So we started with this, with all the different techniques. I added a layer of elements of collaboration, behavior, etc. on this. Now, when you start getting into, okay, which ones are doing well, which ones are not doing well, that could be a combination of the ability we have to execute the technique, combined with the elements of collaboration and focusing on that, the commitment in the organization, but also how that drives towards results. So there's different questions you need to ask to be able to get to these marks. This is what I like to do with organizations, is to say, yes, we have a BRM framework, but where are we at right now? And what are the next steps to be able to start driving that? And I think this is so important to thinking about what do you want to focus on, Take small actions. Don't try to do everything. I know there's plenty of organizations that had a perfect plan for the future. This is what we're going to do. We're going to build relationship maturity assessments. We're going to build strategic relationship plans. We're going to have role clarity, etc. And then suddenly something pops up and we say, but what about dashboards? We need those. Okay, well, let's drop one of those, two of those other activities and now focus on dashboards. So again, your environment will make changes to what you need to focus on. This is a discussion document quite often to address what do we need to focus on. Yeah, what are some of the things we are currently focusing on, but also what are we going to focus on from a future perspective. So that's what we quite often try to address in this. So if you want to navigate the future of BRM, recognize that it needs to be a leadership competency, yeah, that it will drive towards that. Recognize that you need to focus very much on the collaborative partnerships, yeah, and recognize that, yes, the techniques are there, but in the end, it's about behavior, yeah, and that drives the results. So that's what we always focus on. You can start with this now. And that's the key part that I wanted to give the message as well. You don't have to think about, okay, well, in 5 years, I want to be there. Start with it now. Start focusing more on collaboration. Start focusing more on behavior in your techniques, in your efforts, in your things you address. And this is one of the things I want to address. Now, I want to do 2 more slides and then we'll go into questions and answers, etc. So I love this statement from David Snowden. Start your journey with a sense of direction, not a destination. Learn along the way. In complex environments, it is next to impossible to have a fixed destination. We need to know where we want to go. And to be honest, if you have something like, I don't really have a destination at all, start with something that you say that gives me that goes into the right direction at least. So think about this. And yes, I had fun with, in this case, DALL-E as an AI image generator by putting this statement in and getting an image. I still am not completely sure because I still think there should be a bear somewhere on the road and the road needs to go around that. But it's kind of interesting how we quite often are so focused on that destination. We just need to have a sense of direction. So if you're in business relationship management and you see it as leadership competency, pick some things that you say, this is important. I'm just going to go in that direction. I'm going to focus more on behavior. I'm just going to focus more on that specific element of collaboration. I'm going to manage trust here. Go towards a certain direction. If it doesn't work, or if you think you need to change your path. Yeah. In the end, the future, we shape the future. Yeah. So the future is not fixed. And that's also, I think, important from this perspective. Now, if you want to know more about this, we have, of course, BRM courses. We have organizational behavior management course, a certification course that teaches you basically how to get results through organizational behavior management. And then we have our Lead and Succeed workshops, which is one is around Impact Canvas. This BRM framework is also going to be addressed. And I'm sure that some of you have challenges or questions already around this. How do we do this? Yes, there is. We are working on a little bit more of an assessment part, but it takes time to actually build that. And then the last one is managing relationship, which is basically leading with relationships, and that's one that is later this year. So that's just a little bit of guidance around what we're doing in this. But I want to go to the questions and answers, and I'm sure that we had some questions. Elka?
Indeed, Peter, there are a few comments and questions. The first one from Paul, and I added some of my thoughts, but no doubt you will add some of yours as well. Is it it is necessary and does make a difference to have a here. I have my usual question regarding implementation of these techniques in our business. Peter already said it is much better to build leaders competent with BRM than build a BRM team. But to start this in our business, you do need a team to do some change management planning, education, training, and perhaps develop charters with leadership around this. And I mentioned already that it is necessary to have some core leadership to stay the course and drive the bus, so to speak. But no doubt you will have some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, thanks for the answer as well, because that also drives into. And Paul, yeah, thanks for the question, of course. But yeah, I think BRM team is still very valuable. It definitely having people assigned full time to building relationships can definitely help. Yeah, and you can do this in a lot of different ways. It can be from an HR perspective. It can be kind of an account management role, whatever role you have. I think what I read through this question, but also read behind the lines, is that, and maybe that's the answer you're looking for, it's the community of practice that is going to be important. So if you have someone assigned to business relationship management, they can start to build a community of practice with other leaders. But I think the biggest warning I want to address is the fact is that people build a BRM team, and then they only focus on relationship management in that team. You need to expand it to other people in the organization as quickly as possible. So that's really the message I always want to bring to organizations. So, Elka?
Well, more the question towards Paul. Paul, does that answer your question? Does that give you the sort of the balance you were looking for? Or did you have any additional questions for this topic? And I'll leave that to put something in the chat or unmute yourself if you want to.
No, they can't unmute themselves right now, so that's why.
Then that doesn't work. Paul said yes, thank you. Okay. Another question regarding the heat map. So Peter, you put up the map with all the little colored dots on there. Are you applying an assessment scoring map? And if so, how deep does it go, i.e. relative to the sample questions shown? I mean, in my mind, comparing this to the organizational excellence framework assessment approach.
Very good question. The challenge with assessments is that we immediately start looking at scoring and numbers, etc. And that's always what I'm a little bit afraid of. So I'm always trying to be very careful in the balance between what information do you get out of this, and how well is that helping you to further develop. So I think the heat map itself, there will be some scoring behind it. We have multiple questions we need to ask organizations. So because people will ask for that, it's like, okay, well, what am I scoring in? And I'll just go back to some of the areas, but how am I scoring on relationship observation and assessments, etc., and how I'm doing on leadership training? Is, I mean, the questions will give you something. But I don't want to focus on the scoring as much. I want to focus on where do we need to address certain things, and what makes sense. I mean, the things that are in red here, we might have saying, okay, we need to focus on this, but maybe that's not the right timing, or we need to wait a little bit longer. So it's it's not easy to actually do a scoring specifically for that. The questions that we're building right now are maybe more focused on, okay, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? That's the key part. Absolutely, and I saw the message from Sabina. Scoring can be subjective and collective. Absolutely, I'd rather have you say, hey, this is approximately where we are right now, and this is what we're going to work on. So use it as a guide. But I also know that everyone always wants to have that final score, and we want to compare ourselves, and that's not the intent, the comparison. That because there's so much different context and complexity.
And if I can add on to that, when it comes to assessment methodologies in any space, I've seen organizations and work with organizations that have taken assessment methods straight out of the book, so to speak, with the criteria and the ranking and the scoring mechanisms included, without taking the time to review it, assess its validity for our organization, for our intent, for our context. And I think that is the challenge that we see with a lot of the assessments. And this is the recommendation when we look at this BRM framework with the heat map, if you will. The questions are meant to make you think and create a checklist and an associate scoring mechanism, if you will, that is appropriate and informative for your organization. So is there, okay, you have to score here, and here's the industry benchmark. No. Let's create a roadmap and a path forward that indicates value for us, for our organization. So that scoring mechanism is something we need to define in our own organization for our own context, because that will allow us as that BRM team, coming back to Paul's question, that is in the driver's seat of the initiative, to really take a look at what is valuable for our organization, what brings progress, what focuses on the right elements for our organization. And when we're talking about something like organizational behavior and organizational relationships, that is so unique from one organization to another. Do we have common elements? Absolutely. Can we use the same questions? Absolutely. But the answers and the weighing of those answers will be different depending on where you are and what your focus is in the organization. So that brings so much nuance to the scoring, Sabina, and that's, I think, the caution to take when we do assessments, to really think about as a BRM team. Yeah.
Good.
And then we have one more question from Jeff. Are you also creating a new BRM competency assessment with the new framework? I've used the BRM competency assessment from BRMI and believe some of the assessment criteria may need some updating.
I know that in the background that the BRM Institute is doing some efforts to further develop their BRM competency assessments. They're doing a new version of it, or an updated version. We're not involved in that. This is not necessarily focusing on competencies. This is more focusing on the different techniques and how we include the behavior and collaboration elements in there to get the results. So there are two different efforts basically, but the Business Relationship Management Institute is updating that. There's always challenges with that, and I think that's what is normal basically from that perspective. You need to learn how to use those. For the people that want to use the BRM Institute competency assessment, I always say pick 2 or 3 competencies and work on those. Don't do all of them. This is the same thing here with this BRM framework. Don't do all of them. It does not have value to focus on everything because you will do very limited things. So a lot of these frameworks, we need to pick and choose what we're going to focus on. And I saw one comment, I was reading that, that was, the heat mapping is a great input to a BRM team roadmap. That's the same thing as that BRM competency is really good input for, okay, where do I need to focus on? And yes, absolutely, we're using this to build roadmaps. We basically say, what are we going to focus on for the next half year, 3 months, half year, etc., and look a little bit around. Okay, what did we accomplish over time? Yeah, which ones were green, which ones were yellow the last time, and now we put some effort in there, and we actually see that there is some improvement in there. We expanded in the organization, or we got more people involved in that. So.
And if I can add on to that as well, we've seen the organizational behavior elements come in earlier in the presentation. And when we start specifying for our team, for our organization, for our relationships, those new desired behaviors, well, they will translate into competencies. They will equate to things we need to do and tools and knowledge and know-how we need to leverage to actually do those behaviors effectively and consistently. So yes, you cannot help but fine-tune and add on to the baseline competency framework and add on those competencies that are relevant for your organization. And that the same thing that I said before with the heat map assessment, the same thing applies for the competency assessment. You can start with a baseline, but you need to add on those elements that are relevant for your organization. And that applies to competencies and the behaviors supporting those competencies just as much.
Okay, was there anything else, Elka?
I think that was the last question
out of
the chat.
Good. Then I'll wrap up. It's good to finish on time anyway. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Think about it, what direction you're going to take this, not necessarily where you absolutely want to get to. Think about the direction you're going to take. What simple things are you going to improve in the next 3 months, 6 months that can help you to move forward with your BRM capabilities. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of you at other sessions we will have very soon. Thank you very much.